The 21st century, for all its advancements, stands at a precipice. The spectre of a Third World War, once a distant nightmare, looms larger with each passing day. The world watches with bated breath as geopolitical tensions simmer, threatening to boil over into a conflict of unimaginable proportions. Such a war, unlike those that came before, has the potential to reshape the very fabric of our planet, politically, economically, socially, and environmentally. Throughout history, humanity has endured the profound costs of war. From the battlefields of ancient empires to the two world wars of the 20th century, the lessons are etched in blood and suffering. Millions upon millions of lives lost, economies shattered, and a legacy of pain passed down through generations. These are the inevitable consequences of global conflict. Yet despite these hard-learned lessons, the world finds itself teetering on the brink once more. Regional conflicts fueled by nationalism, resource scarcity, and ideological clashes threaten to escalate into a global conflagration. The question is no longer if, but when and what the world will look like in the aftermath. As we stand at this critical juncture, it is imperative to examine the potential consequences of a Third World War. Understanding the multifaceted impact of such a conflict is not about succumbing to fear, but about igniting the imperative for peace. By confronting the potential for destruction, we can and must chart a different course for humanity, one built on diplomacy, cooperation, and a shared future. In the cauldron of global conflict, alliances, once thought ironclad, would be tested like never before. Traditional power structures could crumble, replaced by new alliances forged in the fires of war. The geopolitical map, redrawn with blood, would reflect a world grappling with the aftershocks of conflict. Existing geopolitical fault lines from the South China Sea to Eastern Europe could become flashpoints for wider conflict. Long-simmering tensions between nuclear-armed states could ignite, drawing in regional and global powers in a terrifying game of brinksmanship. The very concept of national sovereignty could be challenged as the world descends into chaos. The aftermath of such a conflict would likely see the emergence of new superpowers, their ascendance built on the ashes of the old order. The balance of power, tipped by military might and strategic alliances, would usher in an era of uncertainty and potential instability. In this new world order, the rules of engagement, both on and off the battlefield, would be rewritten. Moreover, the very institutions designed to maintain international peace and security, such as the United Nations, could find themselves rendered powerless, or worse yet, co-opted to serve the interests of the victors. The post-war world could see a decline in multilateralism, replaced by a more fractured and volatile system where might makes right. The economic consequences of a Third World War would be nothing short of catastrophic. Global markets, already interconnected and interdependent, would collapse under the weight of conflict. Supply chains, disrupted by war and sanctions, would send shockwaves through the global economy. The everyday lives of ordinary people would be upended as the cost of essential goods and services skyrockets. Hyperinflation could become rampant, eroding savings and pushing millions into poverty. The spectre of food shortages, brought on by disrupted agricultural production and trade routes, could lead to widespread famine. Socially, the fabric of societies worldwide would be torn apart. The mass displacement of populations fleeing conflict zones would lead to an unprecedented refugee crisis, overwhelming even the most robust humanitarian aid systems. Social unrest fueled by economic hardship and political instability could ignite civil conflicts within nations already reeling from the broader war. The post-war world would be marked by a profound sense of loss and uncertainty. The collective trauma of conflict, coupled with the breakdown of social structures and economic security, would leave a deep scar on the human psyche. Rebuilding, both physically and psychologically, would be a monumental task, spanning generations. Unlike previous wars fought with conventional weapons, a Third World War would likely see the deployment of terrifying new technologies. Cyber warfare, already a growing threat, could cripple critical infrastructure, disrupting communication networks, financial systems, and even military command and control. Autonomous weapons systems driven by artificial intelligence could make life-or-death decisions on the battlefield without human intervention. raising profound ethical questions about accountability and the future of warfare. The use of such weapons could lead to a dangerous escalation of violence, with potentially unintended and catastrophic consequences. Furthermore, the potential use of biological weapons designed to spread disease and sow terror represents a horrifying possibility. The devastating effects of such weapons, coupled with the potential for mutation and uncontrollable spread, could have lasting consequences for global health and security. The very nature of war, once defined by battlefields and front lines, would be fundamentally altered in an age of technological warfare. Civilians, far removed from traditional theaters of war, would find themselves increasingly vulnerable to attacks on critical infrastructure and the spread of deadly diseases. Section 5. A world in exodus, displacement, and humanitarian crises. The human toll of a Third World War would be immeasurable. Millions, if not billions, would be displaced from their homes, forced to flee across borders in search of safety. This mass exodus would create an unprecedented refugee crisis, overwhelming neighboring countries and international aid organizations. Refugee camps, already struggling to cope with existing crises, would be pushed to their breaking point. The lack of basic necessities, such as food, water, and shelter, would exacerbate tensions and could lead to outbreaks of disease. Children, the most vulnerable in any conflict, would bear the brunt of this humanitarian catastrophe. The international community would face an immense challenge in providing aid and support to those displaced by conflict. The sheer scale of the crisis, coupled with the potential collapse of global supply chains and the breakdown of international cooperation, would make it incredibly difficult to deliver aid where it is most needed. The psychological trauma inflicted on refugees, particularly children who have witnessed unimaginable horrors, would have long-lasting consequences. The loss of loved ones, homes, and livelihoods would leave deep scars requiring extensive psychological support and counseling. Section 6. The day after environmental cataclysm. Beyond the immediate human cost, a Third World War would unleash an environmental cataclysm of unimaginable proportions. The detonation of nuclear weapons, even on a limited scale, would release massive amounts of radiation into the atmosphere, poisoning the air, water, and soil for generations to come. The long-term effects of radiation poisoning, including cancer, birth defects, and other health problems, would be felt for decades. The very habitability of vast regions of the planet could be compromised, leading to further displacement and suffering. Beyond nuclear fallout, the environmental impact of conventional warfare would be equally devastating. The destruction of forests, farmland, and other ecosystems would release massive amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, accelerating climate change and its attendant consequences, from rising sea levels to more frequent and intense natural disasters. The interconnectedness of global ecosystems means that the environmental damage inflicted by war would not be confined to the areas directly affected by conflict. The ripple effects of pollution, climate change, and biodiversity loss would be felt worldwide, jeopardizing the delicate balance of our planet's life support systems. Section 7. Towards a more peaceful future. A call for diplomacy. The potential consequences of a Third World War, as we have explored, are nothing short of apocalyptic. It is a future we must strive to avoid at all costs. The path to preventing such a catastrophe lies in embracing diplomacy, cooperation, and a shared commitment to peace. International institutions such as the United Nations must be strengthened and empowered to address global challenges through dialogue and cooperation. Multilateral agreements on arms control, particularly nuclear weapons, must be pursued with renewed vigor with the goal of ultimately eliminating these existential threats. Investing in education and promoting intercultural understanding are essential to foster empathy and dismantle the narratives of fear and division that often fuel conflict. By nurturing a generation that values peace and understands the interconnectedness of humanity, we can build a more just and peaceful world. The pursuit of peace is not a passive endeavor. It requires active engagement, dialogue, and a willingness to compromise. It demands that we confront injustice, inequality, and the root causes of conflict. It requires us to see beyond our differences and recognize our shared humanity. Section 8. The price of apathy. A world on the brink. The stakes have never been higher. The world stands at a crossroads, and the decisions we make today will determine the fate of generations to come. Apathy, indifference, and the failure to act are not options. We cannot afford to be bystanders as the world marches towards the abyss. The time for complacency is long gone. We must demand that our leaders prioritize diplomacy and conflict resolution over military build-up and saber-rattling. We must hold them accountable for their actions and their rhetoric. Each and every one of us has a role to play in building a more peaceful world. Whether it is through engaging in constructive dialogue, supporting organizations working to promote peace, or simply spreading a message of hope and understanding, our collective actions can make a difference. The choice is ours to make. We can choose the path of conflict, leading to unimaginable suffering and destruction, or we can choose the path of peace, building a future where cooperation, understanding, and respect for human dignity prevail. Section 9 conclusion: choosing our destiny. The possibility of a third world war is a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the interconnectedness of our world. The consequences of such a conflict would be catastrophic, leaving no corner of the globe untouched. It is a future we must refuse to accept. The path forward is clear, though not without its challenges. It demands that we summon the courage, compassion, and collective will to build a world where peace is not merely an aspiration but a lived reality. It requires us to invest in diplomacy, foster intercultural understanding, and address the root causes of conflict. The choice is ours to make. The future of humanity hangs in the balance. Let us choose wisely, for the sake of our children and all generations to come. Let us choose peace.